All right, Neha, I am really pumped because I think, well, I did actually text my group of like girlfriends and I was like, hey guys, I don't know if you've heard of the Power Pause. I'm interviewing the author tomorrow. And this is a conversation that we talk about a ton in terms of work-life balance, being a mom, making the decision, am I going to continue to work outside the home? Am I going to be a stay-at-home mom? Like, what does this look like? The labels, all of it. And I was like, do you guys have anything that you wish was talked about more? And my group chat goes on and off of like, we're either texting 500 text messages in 1 hour or it's silence for 2 days. And the response I did get, though, was people being like, oh my God, I love her so much. I love her work. Like, this is so exciting. So look at you.
Yeah.
You're doing great things.
Thank you.
And I know I've told you that, but like you really are. It's really great. And I feel it's so necessary, especially right now. And that's why I really want to get into it because I have a lot of questions and feelings and emotions around this topic. And not baggage, but maybe baggage. So to start from the very beginning, what is the Power Pause?
So the Power Pause is a rebranding of stay-at-home motherhood, right? This idea that actually if you pause or shift your paid work and shift your time away to time spent in the home, you can actually grow in ways you didn't imagine, expand your network, and actually we reframe that very like shut-in idea of stay-at-home motherhood so that this person can return with more potential and possibility and a greater sense of self.
Where did this come from? Like, what's your journey with the Power Pause? How did you get to where you are now, but really like relabel this period of your life?
So, I mean, you and I were talking about growing up, right? I grew up in a predominantly white town, and this is only relevant because I always struggled with belonging, right? Yep. And then I took a year off between high school and college, and I actually feel like that was my first experience with like taking time away from the traditional path and actually allowing it to reset you.
What did you do during the year?
I went to India. I went back home. And I feel like when you're sort of away from all the people telling you what you're supposed to be, in a space where you can just be, you return to like, what do I care about? Who am I really? And then I came back and I feel like I redeemed myself with my work, right? Like I threw myself into my paid work and I was running brand at a tech company when I had my first child. And I'd gone to Stanford Business School right before. So the expectations on my career were so high, but I'd like checked every box in the book and I was feeling so good about myself. And then I had him. And going back to the belonging, as I was rocking with him, it was kind of like when I took that gap year. Like I looked at him and he didn't want me to be anything else besides exactly what I was in that moment. And I think after years of trying to climb, I just wanted more of that, right? And I want to double click on that just to say I chose at that point to downshift to 2 days a week of work. And eventually I would pause, not because I thought it was better for him, but really because it was better for me.
Which I think is so important to note because I think that plays into a lot of this discourse because everyone has their own opinion. And then I think it also plays into a lot of the guilt that we as mom feel no matter what decision you're making, quite honestly. Like I look at my friends, 95%, 99 are working outside of the home, but there's guilt. My friends who are working inside the home, who are working outside the home, who chose to leave their careers, who chose to pursue them. Like everyone has mixed feelings around them. I kind of feel, I don't know if you agree, it's a little bit of like the grass is always greener on the other side.
100%. But I also, and we'll get into this, is the divides. Like, you know, the reality is that there's no data to show that there's a better outcome for your children. Actually, there's data to show that like it's actually not about the hours you spend with your child, it's about the presence, right?
Yeah.
And that presence is gained when you make the best right choice for you and your family. So that choice for me at the time was to downshift and see what it felt like to be at home with him more. And as soon as I did that, I started hearing, are you giving up? Like, what are you going to do all day? Why did you even bother going to business school? And
from other people or internally?
From other people.
Okay.
Actually felt very clear inside.
Okay.
Because I didn't feel like I was not going back. Like I really truly saw this as like a moment or a chapter. I didn't understand why it felt like this forever choice that was so permanent and such like a career ender. And I realized I was meeting so many women. I lived in the Flatiron by here, and I was meeting all these women that were similar to myself, right?
Yep.
They had clocked in 10 years in their career. They had really modern relationships with their husbands. Their husbands were just as hands-on, right? Like all the data shows that our dads are spending 3 times the amount of time with their kids, right? And so they weren't serving them cocktails at the end of the day. And all of them had their hands in something, right? They had access to digital tools and technology and communities, and were either like tinkering with an idea or considering freelance or saying, I'm going to take a beat, but like I've built up enough of a career that I trust myself on the return.
Yeah.
And none of it matched what I was hearing, and none of it matched where I knew it was coming from, which is these old tropes about stay-at-home motherhood.
Mm-hmm. What went into you making that decision? Because it is a big decision, both, I mean, like mentally, emotionally, financially. Like, walk us through that discussion you had with yourself and with your husband to be like, you know what, this is actually the best thing for our family.
So I talk a lot about testing and learning, right? Because I do think we have so many options, and that's what I did. So I downshifted to 2 days a week.
Okay.
And because of consulting rates, like it made sense for us. It worked. And I did that for probably like 18 months to 2 years, 18 months. And I think that helped because it was a cushion to just see how would I feel at home with him, like with 3 days of the week, you know, playing that role, and how would the version of balance look like? And it worked. It really did, until I had my second child. And I think that you tend to see a lot of people make a different choice around their work and family at like any moment of transition, right? So that can be the first child, it can be the second child, it can be a family relocation or a child's diagnosis or your kids being teens. So there's no like one right time, but I think being able to explore the options available to me to make room for family was really helpful.
When you did part-time, and this is a selfish question because this is just something I have thought about, but I think that that's such a blessing that we've been given, especially like in this post-COVID world. Well, was that even post-COVID? Or
No.
Okay. So
no. So I had my kids 2016,
now,
right?
I do feel like it's more relevant.
Very much so.
And I almost feel like it was kind of the life I was living for a portion of my life as a mom in the beginning, but also I think it's so beneficial when you can do that in a job that you can clock out. That was where I struggled. And I think I just want to bring light to that for anyone else. I tried to do this like, I'll be with him these days and we'll have childcare these days. But my brain never stopped because my business was mine. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that it would be so beneficial for a job that you can be like, these are my set hours and I'm off those other hours. But I almost found it really difficult, which I wish wasn't the case, but that was my experience. Because I never was able to shut the other one off. But I don't know if you ever do in certain
Well, I
careers.
think there's a blessing and burden with choice.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, we can talk about that a little bit, but I think in the world of, and like a lot of my work is really not to say that like stay-at-home motherhood is the right choice or working out of the home is the right choice. Is to like actually expose the vast in between.
There's
right?
such
Like
an in between.
I call it the gray area, that like those black and white ideas actually don't work. And if we actually step into this idea of it all being fluid, then we can make the right choice for right now without shame or penalty. But the challenge is that there are so many choices.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough. And I think whether it's freelance, whether it's part-time, whether it's job shares, whether it's entrepreneurship, like there's always pros and cons. And I think it did work really nicely that I was working for someone that I had the language to be able to say, I'm in office 2 days and I'll be available to like check email, but it wasn't mine. I think now working for myself in the gray area is a very different. Entrepreneurship is always glorified, right? And I think the more money you put into that, the more stress there is, right? The more following you have and the expectation to sort of maintain, it changes your dynamic. The more you care about something.
Right. It's the passion. It's the wanting to do more.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think with women's work, and probably for you too, this work is done because I love it. And so it very quickly becomes self-care, quote unquote, right? So if I have like a minute to myself, I'm not like meditating. I'm going to work on this. And I think that's a tricky piece. But yes, I think going back to how I planned, I do think I would say to anyone, if you have the ability and you're trying to see if something's the right choice, figure out what you're trying to optimize for, if it's headspace, if it's time, if it's less stress, because you're going to make different decisions based on that, right?
When did we even start this label of like working mom / stay-at-home mom? And when did we see, if you know, that clash between the two? Because I know my mom always talks about when we were young, she was still working. She was an investment banker when we were in the city. So up until I was 3 and my older sister was 6. And she just always says that like she would, our nanny was doing primarily everything, but she says that there were always like looks from other moms when she would show up to places, or she just felt so less than or judged, because back then it was rare for her to be working. And not that it's necessarily flipped, but I do feel like now, like there's just so much judgment from everyone around what they decide. Like, when did this battle begin and why does it exist?
So if you look back at the 1970s, so not that your mom was working in the 1970s, just, but if you look back at that time, right, we had just seen like post-war, women took the roles that were vacated by men who left, and women woke up and were like, wait a second, this feels good to make money.
Yeah.
And so we got to the 1970s and that's second wave feminism. We wanted to prove our capacity in the workforce. The same exact time was the boom of television and the boom of print advertising, which is only relevant because suddenly we started to see June Cleaver from like Leave It to Beaver, Lucy Ricardo from I Love Lucy, and that became the stay-at-home mom, the caricature of the stay-at-home mom, which, by the way, has still stuck. So if you ask,
I think of like, what is the name of this show with the Brady Bunch?
Brady Bunch, Carol.
That's who I think of.
Which is funny because if you poll the American public today, and we did this in the American Mothers on Pause survey, right? Fielded across the general population. The most common response for who do you think of as a stay-at-home mom is June Cleaver, Lucy Ricardo, and Carol Brady.
Did Lucy Ricardo even have kids?
I don't believe so. I don't know why. But I think she had an apron, and that's what people think of, right?
Like I really don't think they have kids. And I only want to bring this up because we're literally buying I Love Lucy vintage t-shirts for my sister's bachelorette because her name is Lucy. So that's what we're doing, is like their bachelorette shirts. And I'm now like re-immersed in I Love Lucy, and I really don't think she had children.
No, I don't believe so. And then so the other side of this is if you ask who do they think of as a working mom, who do you think of?
Oh, God.
You're like yourself.
No, like in media?
Yeah.
Is that so sad? I can't even think of one like pivotal person.
It's the most common response is Michelle Obama.
Oh, I was thinking of a TV show character.
Sheryl Sandberg. Right.
Okay, sorry.
Sheryl Sandberg.
I was thinking of TV, but yes, and Lena and Sheryl.
And then Beyonce, right? So think about like people who are real.
Yeah.
Right? That's actually exactly the point.
Yeah.
Is like you ask about a working mother and that perception has been updated to like real human beings.
Right.
Whereas at-home parents were left like fondling Tupperware in the 1970s. And so what happened was second wave feminism did so much great work to show our capacity, but we left anyone who was doing care work with that idea of defending tradition. And then media kept going and we kept pushing like how these sort of amazing figures and we left her behind. But then the Mommy Wars was like truly a fiction created in the 1980s in media. Like media loves a catfight. So they glommed on and we like got stuck with this narrative that like one side was the other. And when you're told one thing is better than the other, you dig in your heels. And so begins this like war.
I think it also is interesting in today's world because like you've mentioned, this gray area, and I want to get into the label of like why we even need to label these things.
Right.
Because I've thought about this a lot, and this is where I feel I have my own baggage. But after I had my first, I was working for myself, but I think to the outside perspective, it was more confusing. Like, how is she actually making money? Like, what is an influencer? What is this? How are you bringing in income? Why would you ever need childcare? That's a whole thing I want to get into also. But I felt like I couldn't call myself a working mom. I felt really weird about it. Like I would be like, well, I'm not, but I'm not a stay-at-home mom because I do make an income. Okay, that's the other thing. Sorry, before we get into this, what even qualifies a stay-at-home mom now? Because
I want to get rid of the term because it doesn't do anything besides divide us. Like, would you really? I think your issue, right? In the same way, when someone first asked me what I did, once I was fully at home, I didn't feel like stay-at-home mom fit.
Right.
Right? Like the reality is that I was taking a beat. I was spending more time with my kids. And so in the same way, would you ever answer a question being like, if someone asked, what do you do? Would you say, I'm a working mom?
Right.
No, why should they say I'm a stay-at-home mom and be defined by this very bizarre, archaic box that actually implies that you're like shut in, stagnant, doing nothing else besides staying at home. Working mom at least is a verb, but I do think people derive a lot of pride from being a working mom, right? You hear a lot of vernacular.
Yes.
Around like, oh, the working mom struggle, the working mom juggle, the working mom, which was a big reason why I started Mother Untitled was because I felt counted out of that. Even though we were all sort of juggling, totally. I hate that word juggle, but we were all figuring it out on the day-to-day and holding space for parts of ourselves, our marriage, our creative pursuits.
Also, I think that like there are things that you're juggling or struggling or balancing, whatever, no matter what. Like a job, I'm just going to say right here, a job is easier than being with your children all day. Like there is no question.
I think I
will be very clear on that. And my husband says it every day.
I will say now, having done all of them, I think that they're hard in different ways. I think this is harder on my heart being away. Like I feel like my mind, like managing but the day-to-day, minute-to-minute caregiving was physically, emotionally, intellectually more exhausting.
Yeah.
This definitely feels, in a way, like a different kind of luxury, like being able to have sort of hold space for like different things and schedule parts of my time.
Right.
You're more at the mercy of other people's schedules.
Yes. I also think you bring up the word luxury. It's interesting. And I see this discourse on social media all the time of everyone saying that the other is a luxury. Well, it's a luxury to get to work. Well, it's a luxury to get to stay home. And I think that what we're discrediting is it's a luxury to choose.
Well, that's my big, and I actually said that intentionally because we're going to say, I think the biggest critique of at-home parenthood and the work I do is, of course, you aren't mentioning the luxury. The reality is 1 in 3 women are forced to stay home.
Right.
Right. Because of the cost of childcare.
I was just going to say
60% are like including financial considerations in their decision to choose because of the cost of childcare, right? And I think for a long time in the quote unquote mommy wars that came out of the 70s, we decided that at-home parenthood was a luxury. And when we say the word luxury, I think it makes it feel like it's worthy of less support, right? As opposed to it is like the privilege is to get to choose, right? Because equally, there are so many women who have to stay in the workforce because they can't offset the loss of childcare and like everything in between. But the privilege is to get to choose. And once we can say like that applies all ways, then every mother needs support because it's all hard work and that's it.
In terms of the label aspect of everything and why I think I had a hard time with like, what am I, is because I was so flex in this gray area. And then kind of like you mentioned, like my second really shifted things for me because my first was he was just like the easiest kid in the world. So like I could work while I was with him and like we had childcare 2 or 3 times a week and that helped. But then we moved and then you add in the commute and then the second baby, like it just was too much. And I also feel like around the same time my career picked up more. And so I leaned in where now like I very clearly am aligned with the label, if you want to say it, of a working mom, but I still get shit on the internet all the time of like, why would you have a nanny? You're just on the internet. And that's what I'm very interested in is what do we even qualify as work? Because I want to dig deeper on that. And I've thought about this where, I got a comment the other day that was like, I think it was like a video of, I was dressed up for the day. I was spending the day in the city doing recordings and meetings. And I was like, oh, it was after the Super Bowl. And it was like just a mom on her way to work, unable to stop singing the Kendrick Lamar song that I had playing in the background, whatever. And someone commented being like, wait, you have a job? I thought you just posted on the internet, like shocked faced. And I think there was shade there. Maybe there wasn't, whatever. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. There definitely was. But
Did you respond?
I said, wait, this is my job, shocked face. And like, I just feel very intrigued by what we qualify as work. Because is it time? Is it money? Is it interest? Because I would consider myself working if I wasn't getting paid and I was volunteering for a nonprofit 40 hours a week. Mm-hmm. I consider myself working now because of the money I make. Like, what is it? Mm-hmm. Do you know?
Well, I think we have a very strange relationship to work and care. Anything done out of love, I think has been grossly undervalued as not work, right?
Yes.
So I think when we do take care of our kids, yes, it's done out of love, but it is still work.
Right.
It is really hard work that also has immense value to it, which we know because of the childcare crisis. So we can't say that it's not work and then also say, wait a second, like when we outsource it, it costs all this money. Mm-hmm. And that's important for lots of reasons when we talk about like planning for this, if you are making a shift with your partner. Work done out of love, like women's work, right? Oftentimes, and I think this is why nursing is less paid. I think this is why teaching is less paid. I think we have just underqualified. And I think we have diminished women's projects, like as projects, like small, that little blog, that little Instagram thing.
I mean, content creation in general, you see a female doing it. It's a mainly female dominated industry.
But when a man does it, it's a media platform.
It's a media platform. He's a media mogul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watch it happen in my life all the time.
Yeah.
I think work is how we spend our time against things we value to move progress forward, right? And that can be, I'm working in the school to move an agenda forward around like more outside time for the kids.
Right.
Right? Like that's work. I'm working on getting my mother's healthcare set up. Work. And I think we've like played down anything associated with care and love.
Yeah,
and passion.
I honestly think we've played down anything outside of an office. Like if you're not stepping into a cubicle, people have such a, again, we go back to like the Lucy Ball and like who we see as a stay-at-home mother. I kind of feel like we have this same issue that we really need to come to terms with as a society of like work can be outside of a cubicle.
Correct.
Whether it's inside of a house or it's on your phone, whatever it is.
Or it's in the fringe hours of family life, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the really interesting moment is that we're reexamining it all right now.
Me too.
And I think that we're in that messy in between where you're still going to face a lot of critique and you're still going to face a lot of having to educate people real time. But in that messy middle, we're sort of disrupting all of the language. We're setting aside the norms. We're saying there are more options on the table, but we're figuring it out real time.
Can we talk about childcare? Because I think that also plays into this, whether it's the label or the guilt, because I know I'll speak for one friend who I have that we talk about this a lot, where she decided not to go back to her career and be full-time with her kids, but is also, or not but, and is also bringing in some outside help. And she feels such guilt around it. And I'm like, no one expects anyone to work 24/7. No other job are you expected to do it by yourself and do it 24/7. And also, no one is expected to be with someone 24/7 and not get annoyed with them. Like, imagine if they were like, hey, your husband's going to be attached to your hip 24 hours a day. Well, I guess they're sleeping fine, but like all day long,
even
asking
then.
you questions, asking for things, commenting on everything you do. I would be like, get the fuck away from me. And I love you so much.
Yeah.
But why?
They would probably love it.
I mean, they would just be like, and now what? What do we do? La, 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 la.
And where's my cell phone?
Yeah.
Where's the sunscreen?
Did you pack this?
Yeah.
But why? I just want to get into the childcare role in this, because do you feel that the people who choose to work inside the home then have a hard time with accepting paid help or seeking paid help And the label of that, like, does that confuse their label?
Yes. Well, I don't think it confused. First of all, let's part with the label for a minute, but I think it confuses the role, right? So I struggled with this myself, which is why, and we sort of skimmed over the financial piece, but let's like go back to it really quickly. So if you're preparing for a pause or you're in it and feeling like, wait a second, I don't have like a handle on my finances, or I'm not feeling like I can get a haircut right now, like great time to sit with your partner. And like, I ideally want to see women, whether this is a financial no-brainer for their family or not, planning for this choice, or men, by the way, 1 in 5 stay-at-home parents are dads. Planning for this, sitting down 6 months ahead of time to say, how are we, like, what do we value in our home right now? What do we both need and want to make this home feel functioning? Because, by the way, second to like the very valid want of wanting more time with our kids, the next thing is less stress in the home, which benefits everyone, right? Because it is a lot to have two parents beholden to a very set schedule with kids out of school like every other day. Yeah. So when you have that conversation, the reason to have it, and besides budgeting, is that's the moment where you say, like, you, partner working out of the home, is really dependent on me having a flexible schedule or being fully on pause to be the emotional and intellectual and family administrator, like the security net that lets you single task without having to worry about this.
Yeah.
And if that isn't feeling like a conversation that's going well, then like spend more time on it, bring in extra supports. Maybe if it like really raises a red flag, that's not the time to like fully part with your income, or write a post-nup. Like I think we've like really put like a lot of shame around that, but that's like a contract in an organization. The reason why that's all important.
Wait, post-nup as in a...
Post-nuptial agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Post-nuptial agreements would be if one partner is making a shift in their career and it's like, you know what, I do feel like this is going to put me in like a little bit of a vulnerable position, and it will make me feel more safe and more validated in my day-to-day to know that you're on board. And like, we did not have to do that because I felt very clear that was, but for some couples, they need that extra.
I mean, I don't see a downside of that, quite honestly.
No, and I think framed as like, this makes me feel better in my day-to-day. But the reason that's all important is because that's a great moment for while you're budgeting to say, like, right now we're budgeting for, you know, as you're going through, this is a joint household income, this is a joint household organization. When we budget for things, it's like we both have access to this to be whole and healthy, because that's what's going to make this family be whole and healthy. And now when we get to help, it's a joint household income, and help of any kind is a joint investment in the household, right? So if you get a cleaning lady or a babysitter for 15 hours a week, that lets the whole household function better. It lets your kids get fresh energy. It lets you feel like you get their reset so you can show up with like better energy for your partner or better energy for yourself and them. It takes the burden off your partner a little bit. Yeah. So like that is the fundamental shift, that this, like, the childcare doesn't come out of the mom's salary.
No.
It is just another line item in a joint household budget. And if you have the access to it and the privilege to be able to invest in it, I think we have shamed people for privilege in this culture. Privilege has become such a dirty word. And I think that was my struggle. And I think many women's struggle is, well, if I made this choice to pause my career, then my entire value is in the day-to-day work I do for the home. But you didn't pause your career only to be a piggy bank.
Right.
You pause your career because you wanted time with your kid or less stress. And like that deserves support too.
I also will piggyback off of that, of like, spending time with your kids does not mean that you are also the sole person responsible for the house being clean and the laundry being done and all of the meals being cooked and all of that. Like, I feel that my husband and I have had this conversation a lot. We're big on division of labor and like who owns what task and seeing those through. And it's a very 50-50 split household. Like you mentioned, it's a privilege for the working parent to have someone at home taking care of things. I feel that it's every week. It's different between the two of us. This week, I'm like, I could never do what I'm doing this week without you. Like the privilege is that you are working from home 4 days a week and you're so hyper involved and able to run this ship smoothly. But I also think that we've talked about, well, if I were to say leave my career and stay at home, I'm also then not solely responsible for making sure all of the dishes are cleaned or the laundry is done. Like, that's not caring for a child. That's caring for a house.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those two things are separate and need to be discussed more. I feel very strongly about that.
I also think you can look at everything that goes into the house and decide that, like, A, it doesn't need to all get done to like earn your stripes as being on a career pause, right? Like the idea of like a stay-at-home mom has to be a super mom. Like it's not, we all pick and choose the things we're good at and we optimize for it, right? I'll tell you, even when I was at home and I was mostly with my kids, I did not like the playground. I really freaking hate the playground. I really.
What is it about the playground that you hate?
Just the children all coming and using my sand toys. And then I'm like, I don't want to model like scarcity for my kids, but like I also don't want you taking, like I'm going to go hunt you down if you take that because that's part of my sand toys. And so I didn't want that for my children.
That is not where I thought that was going. Like I don't like playground because I don't like the small talk, like, hey, that.
No.
Okay. Or
also, my children were never like, oh, we're going to go frolic with those other children. They're both slow to warm up. So I was in the sandbox being possessive about my sand toys. So I was like, I need to put someone else in this. And so when I did bring on a babysitter, I was like, you know what's great for you? You should probably go to the playground. Or when my husband takes over, because for a while when we didn't have paid care, I was like, you're going to wake up. He woke up every morning with them and I would get the morning. And then in the weekends, he would like fill them up with playground time. I
love that. I'm just like, that is so not where I thought that was going, but I love the honesty.
But I also think that at-home parent, like I feel like just because you want more time at home or you want less stress to be able to enjoy this, like God forbid we actually enjoy a stage of life.
God forbid.
Right? Yeah. Like, you know, if like the work is feeling just like I've done all of this and I need a reset and like right now the stress is seeping into my family and I just want to be able to reset the energy in our house. Like, why is that?
Also, I just want to take this time to say that like whether you are working outside the house or inside the house, you deserve time to yourself to like fill into something that makes you happy. And we should not feel guilt around that. Like it's so clearly shown statistically, I don't have a research project to quote, but I've seen them, that a happy mother or parent correlates with a happier child. So like the shame that we're putting on others or the guilt that we're feeling on ourselves when we're investing in that time is so backwards when in reality, we all just want happier kids.
Well, I think judgment, I mean, I had to do a lot of work around this, right?
Yeah.
So like when I think it becomes your superpower once you really crack it, right? But it took me, 5 to 7 years of therapy to let go of other people's approval of my decisions and how I was spending time.
Yeah.
And judgment comes from envy, from a place of like making sense of your own decisions. And I think that's why I hate adding more fire to the mommy words, but I think that that's where it came from. It was like we felt like someone else's choice threatened our choice.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? Like if they're doing that, is that better? And I think when we start looking at that in the construct of like, if they're doing this without a nanny, does that make me less
Am I worse because I need a nanny?
Totally. And by the way, there's so much context, right? Like when I think back on sort of the many different stages of having help, right? When I tried to muscle through it, I was a less than parent. Like that's what cracked. Like our marriage cracked. Like that's where the crack showed. As soon as I brought on help, that's where my like security around like insecurity came up. But my husband was traveling. Right. And he was gone 5 days a week. And like if someone else maybe had less help, maybe they were just like more patient people. They were born with like more patient genetics or they had a different child who wasn't as demanding on the playground. Like, you know, but there's so much context and we have to part with this idea that when other people make choices, they somehow reflect on our choices and set a standard because our families are too unique. Our relationships to work are too unique. Our relationships to finances, our how close in proximity we live, unique. Our mental health. I am, I have to deal with reactivity. I have to put time into that. And so, understanding that as we like parse through the like vast gray, we're going to have to like really part with there being like some templatized version of how this all works.
I want to get into the question of, so what do you do?
Yeah.
And A, why we love to ask that question. B, how you recommend someone who's struggling with how to answer it. Like if they did take a pause in their career, what can provide them with more confidence in their response? And then C, like, should we even be asking this? Because I have feelings around that.
Yeah. So do I. So what do you do has like come to stand in this culture for who are you?
Yes.
Right. And I think that's flawed, right? Because we are essentially equating like what we care about and how we spend our time solely with what we do professionally. But that doesn't become obvious until you don't have a pithy answer, right? So the first time someone asked me, what do you do? I didn't, for reasons we've already discussed, feel like stay-at-home mom spoke to me. But I couldn't say, I run brand at a tech startup. And by the way, when you say I run brand at a tech startup, it flows very quickly. I'm in a leadership position, brand, I'm like somewhat creative, tech startup, like I'm, probably.
You're in it.
Yeah, I'm in it, especially back then. And when you don't have that, it's suddenly like, well, how can I very quickly convey what I care about? And what I landed on, and I think is powerful for anyone, no matter where you are in your gray area, is right now, because whatever you're choosing is not permanent. Right now, I'm spending my time with my kids. We'll see what comes next, was what I came to. Or I'm mostly with my kids. We'll see what comes next. If it was the right person, like if I was meeting you and I felt like, wait a second, like we have like things we care about that are similar, I might say, right now I'm mostly with my kids, but I'm actually working on a project about work and family.
Can I say something though? I love the right now.
Yeah.
Because I agree, everything is so temporary. But what about do you feel that the second part of the like, but, or we'll see, pegs down still the work?
I actually think I get to be with right now. I get to be with my kids. That
100%.
Is the most powerful thing you can say. Or I am if it wasn't a choice, right?
Yeah.
But like for me, being able to stand in like I get to be with my kids.
Yeah.
Mostly with like that's what I enjoy. I think I get to stands in the power of. Did I not say that before? I feel like that.
Oh, but I've heard you say it.
Yeah. Right now, I get to be with my kids. We'll see what comes next. And we'll see what comes next is more so like. This is a long game.
Right. Because there could be people who choose to continue to get to be with their children.
Correct.
All the time.
Like, or I'm exploring, I'm volunteering. Like, add whatever you care about at the time or not. Leave it.
Yeah.
Right now I get to be with my kids. But I think we'll see what comes next. Gives you a sense of, especially when you're adjusting as many professional women are, to this moment of, I paused my career and I don't want to believe that this is a career ender, and you shouldn't, right? We haven't seen enough, and I think now we're starting to like long stories of women who had pauses as part because most people play it down or like bury it in their. There's so many women who have come up to me now and said like, "Oh, I was actually at home for like 7 years, and you just didn't know it." Now they're like in the C-suite of time, right?
But honestly, talk about work experience.
Right.
Like the management aspect of things, the conflict resolution, the learning new skills, like being at home and being with your children and all that comes with that is such, in my opinion, a resume builder because you're doing lived experience. Like you are on the ground.
There's I actually think it's also the empathy, all of the things you said, right? The communication skills, the time management.
Yeah.
I actually think the biggest thing is perspective.
Yes.
Like I think you spend those, and you get that in parenthood, no matter what, but it just raises the bar on how you value your time. I think the other piece that is often played down, we dumb down parenthood. Like we dumb it down in the memes to like diapers and laundry, when the reality of it is, like I was in St. Louis, right, with this woman who has a daughter with diabetes. Her husband's in the military. So she relocated. So family relocation. Now she is dealing with a new diagnosis, getting herself educated on what that includes day to day, getting herself educated on the nutrition, sitting on the phone with the insurance provider to get this child's medication covered, writing protocol for the school in the case of a school shooting, because there's specific protocol that has to happen for children with any specific medical needs. And she's a liaison to the community for any child who gets like that. That work is the real awe-inspiring work of parenthood that builds your passions, it builds your interests, it builds your sense of self. And I think that's the part that has been forgotten.
Do you suggest we stop asking, what do you do?
I suggest we never ignore. So one thing that happened to me, and I ran like this little experiment. I would go to school when I was really in the in-between, and I continue to see myself in the in-between, but I would go to school like quite literally like having rolled out of my, just like in the classic like, and people just don't ask you. They don't ask you anything because they're almost nervous to put you on the spot of how you spend your time, because God forbid you spend your time with your kids. That's like, and so, or I'd sit at a lunch or a breakfast with new couples that we were friendly with, and there was a discomfort. And then if you look polished and you look like it, that suddenly there's a real interest in how you're spending your time, right? And I think my point is to say we need to start asking each other more. Like, not necessarily what you do. I love the question, what are you up to for the rest of the day, or how are you spending your time? Especially like in that like back to school period where you're meeting a lot of new people. It's such an easy way to be like, tell me about yourself, whether or not you do paid work or not. Right. And I love that as a different way, because I think otherwise we continue the divides. And right now, I think the biggest thing in this messy in between where we're doing all of this reexamination of like, how does work and family fit, is if we can get more transparent, if we can have more conversations between women of like, how are you making it work? What are you like actually doing?
I also think that we're so much more than our jobs. And I think that that's something I struggled with, this whole label discussion before kids. When I left my corporate job, the biggest fear I had was I used to love the response I got when someone said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I do sales and trading at JP Morgan. Yeah. Like immediate. Oh, I had their attention. Clout. I had their like, oh, wow, okay. Like immediate. And I wore it as such a badge of honor. And so when I left, I remember being like, what the fuck do I say to someone if they ask me what I do? Because at that point, I also like didn't have a career. It was very like middle. I was trying to build something. I didn't know what I was really doing. And that was like the first notice to me that I clearly held a lot in a label and a lot in other people's opinions of me, that I felt discomfort around that. And I worked through it in therapy, whatever. I worked my elevator pitch. Now I feel very confident in responding, but I do feel that we put so much pressure and awe, I guess, and weight in the label of what we do. And it's so interesting to me. I've said this a few times with my friends and my husband, where I feel the generation before us, like my dad, for instance, he always asks me if I'm talking about something. He's like, oh, what do they do? And I'm like, I actually have no idea. Like some of my friends couldn't fucking tell you what they do. And my closest friends or their husbands, no idea. Like, and my dad will always be, when I'm talking about a new friend, he's like, oh, what do they do? I'm like, I actually don't know. They go to an office, I think. Maybe not. No idea. And I just feel like there's more to people than their job. And I caught myself even the other day when I was having a play date with a new mom friend. Like, I don't ask it, not because I care whether they're working in an office or I don't want them to feel like less than, quote unquote, if they're not. But I just like would rather learn other things about you. And if it comes up, if you mention, oh, I'm on maternity leave, then I'll be like, oh, what are you doing? Or if work comes up, but otherwise, I don't know. I just think that we're so much more interesting than our jobs.
I love what are you up to, because then people can be like, oh, I'm actually, I'm renovating my house. They'll talk about the thing that's, my son's like dealing with an allergy right now. And we're going to the allergist, right? Like,
or like a hobby or charity.
Like, I'm really into, I'm going to Mahjong lesson. Yeah. I'm really curious about Mahjong.
My friends just started it.
I know it's such a thing. But whatever it is, I think the ability to be able to articulate without the parameters of like, I only have an answer if I do paid work.
Totally.
Or that's the only good enough answer.
Yeah, I feel like there's just so much more to have with that.
I am curious. How do you answer that question?
What do I do for work? I say I'm a content creator and a podcast host.
Great.
And then if we get into it, my more like bio is content creator, podcast host, mom, mental health advocate.
Yeah.
But if I'm talking about work, I'll talk about my show. This was another thing I had a lot of stress around, moving to the suburbs. So I was going to be meeting all new people. I felt like in New York, it was way more standard for this in-between gray content creator world. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to ask me what I do. And I'm going to have to be like TikTok. And then they're going to like look at my TikTok and, So I say content creator, podcast host. And then if we get into it, I also talk about like the charitable work I do in terms of like gun rights and like all of that kind of stuff. But that's like my easy one-liner.
Yeah. I
also think in terms of labels that we have to stop saying the like just a mom. I hate that.
It's the one thing it's funny doing this work and realizing that there are some women who really don't mind stay-at-home mom, right?
Yeah.
And if you feel pride and dignity being able to say that, then say it.
Right.
The only thing I don't want people to say is just a mom.
Yeah.
Because I think we have inherited that. I don't even think people believe it when they say it. They just feel like in the construct of a world that has put so much stock into working at JP Morgan, right? Like then it's just relative to that. But I think we are all like everyone is a culture changer right now in the way that we speak.
Agreed.
Just a mom.
And your words have power. Okay, I wanted you just a few advice questions.
Yeah.
So right now there's this like, I don't know if it's a trend, but I've been seeing it on TikTok and it's the surrender to motherhood. Have you seen these?
I'm not on TikTok.
Oh God, I love you. Okay. I'm so jealous.
Go on.
But I've seen these videos of like, I loved motherhood once I surrendered. I'm so happy for the people who feel like it helped them find joy. That's totally fine. But I do not like the narrative, surrender to motherhood, that I have to give up everything else in order to like this.
Yeah.
Like that, no, I refuse. And my girlfriend texted me and was like, have you seen these? Maybe this is why I like feel so depressed because I'm trying to hold on to aspects of my life beforehand. And I'm like, what? We're just supposed to give everything up? What bullshit? I would love your thoughts.
Well, I'll need to look at your TikTok account. Yeah. I refuse. But I think you're like also it's a new framing of martyrdom, which martyrdom, if you look at the word martyr, it's to give up self, like selfless. I feel like people really love that as a adjective or as a compliment, but being selfless means to be without self. We don't want that for ourselves. We don't want that for any of our friends. And I think surrendering might be an oversimplified way of saying like accepting what might be for right now. Like I love the framing of we do have to accept that we're not going to boozy brunches for like this season of life, right? Or that our trips look different, like our vacations look different with our kids and we also know that there will be other seasons where we will be going for 3-hour brunches again, right? That to me is very healthy, right? Accepting that it's a long game and trusting in that. So surrendering feels a lot more like I'm handing in my badge.
I'm falling on the sword.
I'm handing it all in and saying that this is my everything. And we don't want our kids to feel like they are our everything because that is actually unhealthy for them too.
That's what my therapist and I
talk about. Disproportionate amount of weight. On them. They deserve to see us being whole people because what would we want for them? Right. And I think that wholeness allows them to function and flourish.
I just want to quickly say, because this is what I was talking about with my friend of like, the season of life and this season things look different, but also like, obviously there's so much privilege in this statement, but like we can still go to a long brunch.
If you really love a long brunch.
If that's what you want to do. You can like that. That's what I think I have a hard time with of like, a girls trip. You can still go on a girls trip. Obviously, it's a lot harder and things come into play and there are privileges that have to be had to be able to do that. But we can still do things that like not Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I think what you're saying, which I like, and I use the brunches because like that's not a huge. I don't need a 3-hour brunch. Yeah. But I do really need travel. Like travel to me still like time with my husband still lights me up. Going out with friends still lights me up, right? So we pick and choose the things we care about. We don't have endless amounts of time.
No,
I think that is what I'm like understanding that in this season of life. We do not have the same amount of time available to us. And we have to be picky and choosy about what we're going to focus on for right now and accept what's not for right now.
Yeah.
And by the way, that can also go, for me, I'm accepting that like I'm not going to be a pickup every single day like I might have been back then. And I love and embrace that I get to do this.
Yeah.
And that feeds me. So it's like a constant equation of we have this many hours available. And we're all getting to pick and choose what we care about and what lights us up, but it shouldn't be like a default. I'm going to give everything up in service of my children. Yes, agree.
What advice do you have for women who want to re-enter the workforce but feel overwhelmed by the transition?
Yeah. I would say give yourself at least a year. I think this idea that you're going to be able to suddenly segue back into it sets you up for feeling like a failure, right? I think there's a lot to be said for all of the work you've been doing at home, but also how you have to dignify it with fancy language.
Yeah.
Meaning, like I encourage every woman keep a running list of the little accomplishments that aren't so little, right? Like negotiating a bus route for your kids' school system was one I heard from North Carolina, right? That's a huge, which that ended up translating to on our resume was implemented highly technical infrastructure change to local organizations. Yeah. Very impressive.
Very impressive.
But the point being, even if it's advising your friend or in her business or setting up a new nutrition plan for your home, keep a running list because it's going to do two things. It's going to, one, point you towards like, oh, I'm actually really interested in project management. I forgot that part. Or I'm like, actually curious about nutrition. I want to like double tap on that and I'm going to take an online certification class. Like it's sort of directive. But that year allows you two things. It allows you to start to take stock of, do you want to pivot or do you want to continue on the path? If you want to continue on the path, how might you start having conversations with people in your old industry, right? Or what's one thing you can do each week, whether it's like meet an old mentor or like post on LinkedIn about the related topic or take an online class to like bolster that aspect. And if you're pivoting, like the content we consume leaves so many clues for what lights up, whether it's gun safety, whether it's nutrition, whether it's mental health, whether it's family policy, whether it's interior design or something creative, and allowing ourselves to study ourselves, right? And allowing the stage of life to actually be a moment where we get to rediscover, well, yeah, I always loved banking. Those skills and experiences don't evaporate, but this new period is going to be another layer. And how can I make this layer as rich as possible? And I think a lot of that comes down not to saying like, I'm suddenly going to discover like a whole new career, but how can I plant little seeds that are measurable each quarter that move myself closer? So once you're like about a year out, I would also start with your friends. Like it's very nerve-wracking to have to put ourselves out there, but our friends and our network that, by the way, we've assembled in Drop Offline are the best place to start.
Agreed. I want to do some quick questions, okay?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you were like, how do I decompress before we started?
Oh, no.
Well, but it is, how do you fill your cup up as a mom? It could be literally anything. Well, you're a trainer.
So it changes in different seasons.
Yeah.
Like for a while, it was like I spray this eucalyptus spray in my hot shower, and that was like enough. And a 15-minute Melissa would help, right? And now I really committed to, I'm going to do an hour of a trainer 3 times a week. And that is doing everything for me. I just want to feel like I can put a suitcase up without like a man saying to me, oh, you need help.
Yeah. Honestly, though, I will say the benefit of the young kids, my arms have never been stronger in my life because I'm constantly holding them because mine are younger than yours.
I know.
They're always in my arms.
You know that meme, like, you'll never know the last time you'll hold
I know, it breaks me.
Yeah. It's true.
It breaks me. And every night I've been up with my youngest every night this past week. So we're on 4 hours of sleep last night, which is not ideal. But the sick, twisted part of my brain is like, what if this never happens again? What if this is the last, which I know that's far off because he's only 16 months.
Do you think that's what they're saying with the surrendering? I'm not on this, so I haven't seen it, but I wonder if that's the mindset that they're trying to, because I guess that's the healthy side of it, is like embracing like this, but also like at some point if you're like, I need sleep, that's also fair.
But that's the thing.
But it all passes.
I think maybe the word surrender is what I don't love.
I think surrender sounds like you lost a war.
Yeah.
You lost. And I hate the idea of losing yourself in motherhood. I think that is such a flawed narrative.
Yeah.
Because the reality is like, we change from 5 to 50 and 15 to 20. Well, like we change, obviously.
Because with sleep, for instance, like that's a big trigger for me because sleep is like so deeply tied to my mental health personally.
Right.
And like I'm not someone who can function well on lack of sleep. So it's been interesting with my second, for example. There are nights where he's not sleeping well and I'm just kind of like, all right, I'm throwing the towel in and we're co-sleeping and it's not going well for either of us, but whatever it is, what it is. But also I can't do that every night personally. So like I can't surrender to that. Like that can't be something that becomes our norm for me and our household.
100%.
Because it is detrimental to my brain. But maybe. Okay, what's one mantra or affirmation you turn to when self-doubt creeps in?
Right now.
I like that. What's one thing you wish every woman knew about the power of pause?
That the work you're doing has value and you deserve support.
I like that. A few would you rathers. Would you rather have a self-cleaning house or kids who always listen the first time you ask?
Kids who always listened.
Would you rather never have to pack another school lunch or never have to do another load of laundry?
School lunch. Laundry.
Okay. Would you rather step on a Lego every morning or listen to Baby Shark on repeat for an hour a day?
Baby Shark.
Really?
Oh my God, that Lego really.
Oh, Baby Shark to me is like nails on chalkpboard.
But you know, we never watched Baby Shark. That was after my time.
We don't either, but like they play it at like
this might be
playtime at school, so like he still sings it. Would you rather have an extra 3 hours in the day just for yourself or be able to function perfectly on only 4 hours of sleep?
Oh, I'd rather an extra 3 hours a day.
And then what is one piece of advice you would give your former self as a first-time mom?
That you deserve help.
Yeah.
All the help. It's a gift.
All the help.
It's a gift.
I know. Why is it so hard to accept?
Because we believe that we have to struggle through
martyrdom. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. I love what you're doing. As you know, I've told you, but I really think that this is such a powerful conversation for many. And where can people best support you who want more of you?
You can follow me at Mother Untitled on Instagram. You can subscribe to the newsletter on motheruntitled.com, or you can buy the book.
Everything will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.